Peace and blessings. Welcome back to the channel, or if this is your first time on the channel, welcome. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification button so you can get notifications when great content like this comes out. You're going to enjoy today's video. There are many other videos to go and watch if this is your first time here. But everything I talk about is how do we take a holistic and natural approach to healing other than a man-made approach? And also, how do we prevent dis-ease in the body as well, too? Because, you know, they say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cures. I mean, if you prevent disease, then you don't have to cure it in the first place. Okay, so that's my whole approach to what we do. And today, we're going to be having an interesting conversation because I always have people who ask me, like, what type of herb do I use for this? What type of herb do I use for that? What food is good for this? What food is good for that? Everybody is wanting to figure out what do I need to add to, to heal myself. But what people aren't really trying to figure out is what I need to subtract. What do I need to eliminate? Because what you need to eliminate is probably the cause. That's what's causing the dis-ease or the discomfort in the first place. So we're going to talk about the seven foods that are probably killing your health. And then before we do that, I'm going to explain to you how many of these foods have very common things that they cause in your body. Okay, so that's what we're going to explore today. So let's jump into it. All of these foods cause inflammation. And as I always say, inflammation is the foundation of all disease. It starts with an irritation. So the irritation could be one of the seven foods that I'm about to talk about in a second, okay? It could be, a toxin. It could be stress. But the irritation, when you consume it into your body, it causes an irritation to the tissues. That irritation leads to an inflammation. As the tissues become inflamed, they start to sort of cause dysfunction amongst the cells. This causes the tissue itself to be dysfunctional, which leads to organ dysfunction because guess what? Organs are made of tissues, okay? As organs become dysfunctional, the systems that are around this organ become dysfunctional as well, i.e. the cardiovascular system, okay? So it's so important for us to understand inflammation is really at the foundation of most dis-ease, okay? And the unfortunate thing is the seven foods that I'm going to talk about, all of them cause inflammation in the body, systemic inflammation, not just in your muscle, in your joints, but everywhere in your body, places you can't even feel it, okay? Number two, all of these foods are going to cause toxicity to the body because all of them are laden with food chemicals, hormones, nitrates that are carcinogenic, they cause cancer. And as a result, as this toxicity accumulates in the body, it also causes irritation, which leads to an inflammation, which leads to tissue dysfunction, will lead to organ dysfunction, which leads to systemic breakdown or dysfunction as well too. So as your heart system or cardiovascular system begins to break down because of the irritation, because of the inflammation, now you have high blood pressure. Now you have a stroke. Now you have an aneurysm, etc. Okay, so toxicity is very common among these seven foods that I'm going to talk about. Constipation. All of these foods cause constipation because all of these foods don't have fiber in them. Fiber is one of the root things you have to have in your diet, in your bowels, to be able to have a bowel movement, okay? The vast majority of a bowel movement is fiber and water. So if you don't have fiber, you won't be able to make the stool, which means that you'll be constipated, okay? No fiber and no nutrients, no digestive enzymes, because real food has its own digestive enzymes to help break itself down, okay? The other commonality among these foods is that it's going to elevate your blood sugar and cause insulin resistance, okay? And as your blood sugars become elevated and you become insulin resistant, the unfortunate thing, that is going to cause inflammation in the body as well. So you can see how this is all connected. Also, hormonal imbalance. Many of these foods that I'm going to mention to you cause hormonal imbalance as well too. And we know what that can lead to. That can lead to impotence for men. That can lead to breast cancer or even fibroids for a woman, okay? And then all these foods also cause weight gain, okay? Not only because they cause blood sugar dysregulation, which leads to an increase in insulin, which is a fat storage hormone, but also because a lot of these foods have toxicity in them, as I mentioned before. And guess what? Toxicity and fat love each other, okay? So the more toxicity you have in your body, quite often you're gonna store more fat, because guess what? The toxins go into the fat. That's the primary storage facility for toxins in our body, okay? So that's why we end up with a fatty liver, because our liver is designed to process out toxins. But the more toxins you're bringing in, you know, the body is trying to figure out a way to buffer the effect of the toxins, so it adds more fat. It creates more fat, okay? So it's gonna add more weight to your body. And then the very last thing, but there are many others, is that these foods cause heart disease, okay? So let's jump into it. We're gonna start with number one. Number one is dairy. The number one food is dairy. And again, this isn't any order of priority, but dairy is scary. And here's why. Dairy is very constipating to the body. That's the first thing. The other thing about dairy is this: it's very addicting. Most people, when they're trying to transition to a healthier lifestyle, remove some of the dairy, remove some meat, they find it more difficult to actually get rid of cheese than to get rid of meat because cheese is very addicting. Okay, you can check out my book. I have an entire chapter that I talk about dairy. And one of the things I mentioned in there is that dairy has these compounds in it called casomorphine compounds. And casomorphines, if it sounds familiar, is because they mimic morphine, like morphine the drug, okay? So that's why cheese is so addictive, okay? So that's one thing. The other thing is the vast majority of dairy cows are injected with hormones, okay? And the hormone in particular is RBST. This causes that, 200-pound, baby calf to become 1,000 pounds in a year, okay? And we know that to be true because guess what? When women take birth control pills, which are hormones, one of the side effects, common side effects, is they grow and they add weight to the body, okay? So we know that to be true, okay? And so dairy is very scary for that reason. It also, not only if it clogs up the digestive system, it can also clog up the arteries as well too, okay? Number two food, sugar. Sugar. Now everybody knows that sugar is bad. I don't think people know how bad sugar is, okay? So let's break it down a little bit, especially high fructose corn syrup. One of the things that sugar does to the body that most people aren't aware of is that it inflames the body. See this reoccurring thing. It not only inflames the body, but it ruins the microbiome or the good bacteria inside of the gut, okay? That is also protecting you because around 80% of your immune system is actually manufactured by the good bacteria in your gut. So if you're consuming something that is actually killing it, guess what? Your immune system is going to be weakened, which means that you're going to be more prone to infection. Okay, so that's one thing that it does. It's also going to raise your blood sugar levels, as we talked about before. But the thing that most people don't know about sugar is that all additional sugar or excess sugar that is consumed in the body is going to be converted into fat. Okay, it's going to be converted into fat. So that sweet tooth, although it's sweet, that's why it adds a lot of weight to your body as well too. Okay, so sugar is crippling to the body in terms of inflammation, in terms of like ruining the microbiome by killing the good bacteria in your gut, and so much more. So you got to get rid of the added sugar. I'm not talking about the sugar that is actually in fruit, because that sugar is attached to fiber. It's very different. I'm talking about all this added sugar that you'll find in everything from ketchup to mayonnaise to everything. They put sugar in everything because they know that we're addicted to it. And they know that that is the one thing that is the socially accepted addiction, which is sugar. We call it a sweet tooth, but it is an addiction. Okay, so number two, the food that is killing your health is sugar. okay? Number 3, seed oils. Yep, seed oils. Now, seed oils are very dangerous because they contain compounds that are very inflammatory, okay? So they contain a compound called linoleic acid. It's very inflammatory. This compound causes heart disease, dementia, and even cancer, okay, with these seed oils. And when you think about it, you think about something like canola oil. Canola oil isn't really from a natural place. Canola oil, which is an oil, the name comes from Canada and oil. Canola oil, Canada. It was made in Canada, okay? So it is a manufactured refined oil. It is very inflammatory to the body, especially the heart, especially the blood vessels. So when you're consuming these seed oils, it's important for you to know that you're ruining the linings of the epithelial blood vessels, okay? And the reason why that's so important is this. When you look out in nature, you won't find, oil dripping out of a tree or oil coming out of the ground. It has to be taken out of something. The same way they take sugar out of cane, they take sugar out of beets. Once you take the sugar out of a plant, once you take the oil out of the avocado, out of the grapeseed, you have now deviled it up. It is no way similar to what the natural form of it is. So if we really want to get our healthy fats, we can eat the whole food, okay? But when we consume foods that are fried with these seed oils, they're very dangerous to our bodies. And the other thing is, most people don't think about this, is that whenever you add high temperature to these oils, they become denatured. And when they become denatured, they become very dangerous for our health as well too. So seed oils, you got to get rid of those too. Processed foods, 60 to 70% of the standard American diet is processed food. Okay, just think about that. If you eat like most people eat and you don't have sort of any restrictions on, hey, I don't eat this, I don't eat that, the average American eats around 60 to 70% processed foods. Now, here's why that's big. Processed foods contain food chemicals, okay, that are inflammatory. Primarily, they have a lot of omega-6s in them that are inflammatory. So you definitely want to get rid of the processed foods and switch them out for the natural foods. Number 5, refined carbohydrates and white flour. Refined carbohydrates and white flour. On average, the average American consumes around 135 pounds of white flour every year in the form of breads, pastas, etc. Okay? Now, that refined carbohydrate is nutrient poor, okay? And again, the reason why we know that is because quite often when you buy the bread, you buy the pasta, you get the cereals, it'll say on the front, enriched with, and then name a few vitamins or minerals. But it's important to understand is that it's enriched because it was poor, okay? Because the refining process pulled all of the fiber and all of the nutrients out of it, and all you had left over was this white powder. All the good stuff is gone. And now they're enriching it with man-made vitamins and minerals, not natural vitamins and minerals, okay? This is very inflammatory to the gut, very inflammatory to the body. It dysregulates the blood sugars and also causes insulin resistance, which is a real huge issue, okay? Number 6, soy protein isolates. And this is really big in the vegan community because a lot of the faux meats or vegan meats are made from soy. And what people don't understand about soy is this. If you go back and you look at one of the originators of growing soy in America, George Washington Carver, he said you should never consume soy. And if you go a little bit further back during that time and see what farmers thought about soy, they would never feed their livestock soy, okay? They knew that it would kill the livestock or make them sick, okay? And guess what? Here we are, 50, 70 years later, and that is the primary food for most of the animals that are killed today in slaughterhouses. It's soy. They feed them genetically modified soy. And the reason why I say genetically modified, because 90% of all soy grown in America today is genetically modified, which means that they're not only consuming soy, which they shouldn't consume, because the only way, I lived in Japan for almost 4 or 5 years, and the primary way, if the Japanese or Asians or Koreans consume soy, most times it was fermented. The fermentation process removes all of these negative things out of the soy, like the goitrogen compounds, the anti-nutrient compounds, and things of that nature. So it's important for us to know we're feeding our animals something that shouldn't be consumed in nature, okay? And that's their primary feed. So this is why you hear grass-fed, but here's what people don't know about grass-fed. Most of the grass-fed cows or what have you that you're consuming, yeah, they were probably grass-fed before they went to the slaughterhouse, but they probably grew up in a livestock farm where they were consuming soy up until that point. And not only are cows fed that, our chickens are fed that too. And soy is very dangerous to the body, especially because now this soy, when it becomes a protein isolate, there's a chemical process that it goes through. And that chemical process uses chemicals like aluminum and hexane, okay? Which are carcinogenic to the body, okay? And again, 90% of all soy grown in America is genetically modified, which means that it's sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, Roundup Ready, etc. Okay, atrazine, you can go down the list. And the last one for today is meat, okay? And I know you're like, Dr. Price, meat? Yes, meat. They did a study called the China study. And the China study was a 30+ year study that's probably still ongoing at this point. They were able to track people from different provinces all over China, and they were able to get over 6,000 participants in this study, measure and keep data on what they were eating. You had people who consumed a primarily standard American diet, you can say. And then you had people who lived out in rural areas who primarily ate a plant-based diet with a little meat here and there. And what they discovered was the people who ate the least amount of meat had the least amount of cancer and the least amount of heart disease, okay? They found that when people consume less than 5% of meat, they actually had healthier outcomes around all diseases, okay? And that was most likely grass-fed meat. I think that's the important thing to kind of take home there. And then the other thing that's important to understand is most of the meat today is filled with, hormones, antibiotics. They feed these animal antibiotics because antibiotics make them grow as well too. And then also, it's important for you to know and understand that a lot of these animals get sick, and the disease that is in these animals, you consume that meat when you consume them. And then also when you cook it, the heating process creates these compounds called heterocyclic amines that are carcinogenic. And then also what's really important is that, for a lot of people, they don't understand that even in a lot of restaurants, they're finding that a lot of these restaurants, even like high-tier restaurants, are using what's called meat glue to kind of put pieces of meat together and make like a steak or make like a rump roast of meat scraps, okay? So meat is very dangerous for the diet because it doesn't contain any fiber at all, okay? And if it doesn't contain fiber, you can't eliminate it, which means that's why you have to have vegetables with it, because the only place you're gonna get fiber from is from fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, okay? Hope you guys have enjoyed this. Hope it's been educational. Until the next time, peace and blessings and Godspeed.